Thank you very much again, Candace, for those kind words, and Carol as well. I appreciate the opportunity. I am a long way from the homeland, as it were, of Silver Bow and the RCLAS, and y'all are very kind to give me this this platform today. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I will read from the book today, and strangely, I'm going to be starting at the last poem of the book, and then I'll be jumping around a little bit. The last poem is a poem that was inspired by the abstract expressionist painter Mark Rothko, whose work has always greatly inspired me. Just generally, I've always wanted to be a painter, like Candace is. I'm not able to reach those heights yet, but hey, there's always time. The interesting thing about Rothko in particular, as well as I have a couple of epigraphs that begin the book. When you open the book, there's a quote from Rothko where he says, "Silence is so accurate." And then I follow that after a couple of pages with one from Gerard Manley Hopkins, another one of my favorite poets, completely different kind of poet than I, but nevertheless a great influence on me. And he wrote, "Oh, the mind has mountains, cliffs of fall, frightful, sheer, no man fathomed." So that kicks off this collection. And I'll begin with the poem at the end of the book, which is called Conversation with Rothko, where figuratively, the painter and I cover 6 separate colors, which he might have used in any given painting of his. So this is called Conversation with Rothko. Red. The world is not a kind world. It's best to realize this. Red doesn't occur in nature. We seek it through our fear of red. Colors are ghosts of bone houses, gone now to seed. Blue. The opposite of windows is the open air. Darkness in the foreground brings alive the western skies, and wind can give texture to things that cannot, will not move. Green. I had wished to hold a moment, an aerial view of the counties. Death is peace. Water flows uphill and clocks aren't vaned. We can count to nothing and start again, or else become the leaves that we are. Black. A magnet for vision draws in all eyes and itself and sings. One is none, is everything, but even light can't escape. Unsex the sunset. Take it to the perfect night of prayer. White. Painters have nothing to say anymore. They flood the intersection with bright, bright light. Play God, make holy the vacant. I walk out of the chapel into a glaring absence. Yellow. There is no yellow in point of fact. It's only suggested by an empty width out before us. Don't offer heat to the cold morning. Add nothing. Remain. Stop your painting. But we aren't at home here. Otherwise, we would just breathe. Now we'll go to our next poem here. And this one is called Wide as the Summer Dusk. Before the Before the reading began, we were discussing that I sometimes will sit on my front porch. In the evening, in particular, you can see the weather quite clearly in the southwestern sky from here, and I often will watch the storms as they move over the Georgian landscape, and I'm often inspired by nature, as many of my poems will show. So this is Wide as the Summer Dusk. A blur of worlds at elevations where heaven starts, indistinguishing space, clouds, rain, and the very tops, land and tree, all in this blue air. Places with views of the weather clear the deck of distraction. Like the false security of radar, seeing is confirming, looking for probabilities where no certainties survive the winter. Steering wheel wide as a summer dusk. The farther back I stand, the more the circles merge and all direction erased. As the sun rises, it sets somewhere in a tandem dance. Bells chime as the curtain comes down the gap and across lesser hills to where I am, flummoxed into believing change is almost always good. The next poem is the poem that starts the book. I've already hit the last one, now we have the first one. And it's called Coming to Ground. Again, a meditation on the natural world around where I live. Used to be much more rural than it is now, but Atlanta is a huge city, and even 40 miles out, we're starting to see the lights in the sky at night. But this one is called Coming to Ground. Sear blows over like yellow butterflies. Souls are in the grove. Trees rattle an end that rises, dims like breathing, moves through like moving, and gone. Sure enough, the angling of light looks even later. Hear the wind, hear the sound limbs make when they come to ground. And when you are a watcher of the sky, so to speak, as I am, props to Peter Gabriel for that line, I suppose. But you often, and I have become a student of the seasons. I know where the sun goes as the seasons continue. I know which tree it goes behind, how far it goes in the summer, and in the winter as well, the other direction. And so this one is called Longer Days from Now to June. Longer days from now to June, when fields erupt in solstice. Today begins inching sunlight, longer every morning. The rains fill aquifers 100 miles south of here and spring up from the ridgeline as a shadow of shorter night shudders in the starting up, and all in search of a bloom. As you see, I don't necessarily write a lot of poems. I don't know if that's a curse or a blessing to the reader, writing a long poem or writing a shorter poem. I'm not sure. It's just whatever hits me at the moment. This is another fairly short one, and it's called Unanimity. Red wings pour out from any number of trees, a formation, a singularity, then a sky. They crowd the edges, a few drops but holding, brimming, not straying away from the local common lung. and comforted in their unanimity, like a thermal black flag cast into weather. I am sometimes obsessed with birds, and that poem gave you an indication of that imagery. Here we see some more of the similar imagery. It's called All Our Living. There's a jumping between trees, a slight elevation, luring wings across, along, among. A refusal to seed, a greening back to gray becomes part of me. Catching my breath just after pneumonia, I glide, I see the air. The sky holds all of our living, holds me in my chatter, holds you. Many times over my lifetime, I have traveled to a place in Southwest Florida, a town called Fort Myers, Florida, which is about 16 miles inland from the Gulf of Mexico. My grandmother lived there for basically a half a century. She moved there when I was born, actually, in 1959, and I went there and have gone there even since her passing, pretty much every year of my 62 years. And recently I wrote this poem. I'm a lover of Spanish poetry. I am not necessarily bright enough to read it in the original language. I love the translations, however. And I enjoy Octavio Paz, Lorca, others. And this was inspired sitting on the porch on a back street in Fort Myers in a 100-year-old house with the palm fronds everywhere. And it's called Rio Paz, or Peace River, which is in that general area. In the courtyard by the river, rain drips from awning furled like a canopy of aluminum and green sugar. Lorca's book of poetry sweats letters on a wicker chair. He was buried in an unmarked grave, they say. Would-be hawks and trucks compete in town, a smattering of flashes and pops. They could be an awakening, but thinkers get distracted. Questions forget. A bold day of reflection should find a garden, all tools replaced with pins. But see the scops navigate traffic, dumbasses, self-pointed, while the beautiful city falls. They give names to small streams like hurricane names, but still the streams are small. The dying breed, with dying art from more than a keyboard, a parcel of conflict, in and out of meaning, knotted like fishing nets and word fronds and the remains of fiddler crabs, should now compose. Exhume that patch you're standing on. Otherwise, the first casualty could be the past, because just under the peel is something gone the way of breath. So hide your sentences in small corners, creases, gaps, wicker, carefully folded, considered in a quiet place, alone, free, always free. We walk on porous ground. It holds no water, but has a current of souls. Sometimes when ferries are closed upriver, folks get stranded on the banks. But others transfigure out to sea, silent, leaving only characters. All right, we will continue now with a couple of poems that reflect my deep concern over the fate of civilization as we find it today. I am a student of history and law over the years, in addition to literature, of course. And I'm troubled by where the world seems to be heading right now. I'm not quite sure what the signs are or what the omens are telling us, but concerned, nevertheless, I am. And so the next couple will be addressing very generally that approach to the world. And the first one is called The Quiet Days. The black line edge along canopies of various green interrupts, blends, but is other than the sky. Availability of light determines truth, which explains why dread of twilight and dark drapes everything above ground. The mind-sized universe strains at the now, whose borders blur like late-day film. The highest part of the afternoon dome flickers a spotted view. A waterfall of blue belies magma below, parceled into forms with shoes to match our burning, tightened, distancing, almost overlapping, more huddled than before. All this must be a song I dreamed, one played by a brass band at sundown, long after the gig has ended. There, under velvet stars, I see for miles the rows of radio towers, just starting their broadcast night. The next one is I begin to sense the burning of books. I begin to sense the burning of books. Opposition has become criminalized. The other. They are unworthy of opinion. I wonder how it came to this. I begin to sense few to no places of refuge, even looking at various satellite images from above. Phare is foul, sure enough, without a way to leave. I hear a piano painting with large and small brushes. It drapes the block, the grid, appealing and appalling. The tedium of chaos answers, yes. I begin to sense the end of something. It's cheap to mention Constantinople, but damn. Tell the monks to record us using paper made of water. Next, we have a poem that attempts to address the idea of the difficulty involved in having mental anxiety at times. I have often found that most of the creative people that I've known, and I've known many over the years, now and again may suffer from a bit of darkness here and there, and learn how to deal with it as best we can. Ultimately, I think it's safe to say that poetry for me and music and composition in general is therapy in many ways. I think most of the creative people listening today, watching today, would understand that. And so the next one is entitled Breaks. What it talks about is, if you're like me, when you write, and I try to write constantly, but sometimes I'll go through my journals and I'll see that there's a gap of maybe a month, maybe 2 months. Very rarely, but it does happen, has happened. And so this one is entitled Breaks. You'll notice the gap in my journal. It approaches 6 weeks, even longer. You'll wonder why the writing basically stopped, scattered, awoke in time for later. There may be other questions about shadows and space and curtains that didn't move even with windows cracked or open. Later, you will disregard the gap altogether and return to your life, to your own moments of darkness and light. But the break in my journal will still be here, still with an open, quiet mouth. This one is called Your Breathing. Here, leaning in to get a better view, I think while sunning full-faced, there's a poignance in my brevity. Truth shows up. The metal's edge makes a cicatrice of a once clean place. Geography rises, then breathes out. Perfume on my hands, Arabian. Can't distract from the tattoo that is my room. I join your breathing. It teems, it crowds. I'm a great admirer of Abraham Lincoln, and I feel that looking at images of the late president, from his earlier photographs to the ones just before his assassination, you see the intensity of life reflected in his face, in his facial features, and the lines and the canyons in his face, symbolically in the broken plate that is the last image that we are familiar with. And I refer to him here, and I refer to him because I see that Lincoln is the lost leader that we in the United States always seem to need so desperately. He was there for us once. He saved everything. But sometimes I get the feeling that we need him now. And so in that context, I have this one entitled Boundary Trees. A few minutes before the weather hits, I hear a growl, a tone under the ear, more feel than actual note. It rattles and shows like 1,000 firework bursts coming from behind the curtain, and it moves this way. The clay and light conduct combine into a swimmer's road. The wind self-fulfills, touches, becomes more senses, than we are. In a voice like Lincoln's, but deep as a god's, it lays low the boundary trees, their purpose, submission, asunder, like something that burns. Division becomes academic. The house has no center, no low place for us to stow away, and it roars up the angled wheel like angry kettle drums, like Bosnia in the 90s. On a similar theme, this one is called Civilization. Winds blow the timbers holding up the porch. I hear thunder to the north, making strange the evening voice. Second day of spring. The sun tilts. It still burns like Sherman's Columbia, conjures shadows into lengths of prophecy, eventually stretching to combine into a night we don't recognize. Aroused by southerlies, the blooming starts. It spreads across my flashing countryside. This one is called The Ground Gives Way. In high mountain air, lightning from counties 50 miles behind, a series of ridges flashes quiet, slow, like bubbles, enlightenment, epiphonic at various locations along the spine of Atlas. My God, the sounds in the night, and so many in succession, the world, the storm. We watch news like fireworks, like Dresden. The view made counterintuitive. Love thy neighbor, except in righteous acts of vengeance. Sometimes the ground gives way, so full of rain as to confuse earth with sky and lose balance at elevations above and beyond the mortar, glue of our tongue and groove granite temples. My anxious dinner. Plates clatter late afternoon. Prodigal dragons in flight outside the short lawn. In authentic present tense, I cower. The land is a stew made of green bell curve peppers, a harvest from rocky blood red Blue Ridge fields. I won't forgive the chef for bringing me the good and broken all at once, making true my anxious dinner. Next one is called Comfort. Birds have flocked like jazz on my water oak, with voices just above the low rumbled log rolling west-east of summer varieties. Reminds of guns of gods getting closer, artillery convulsed like Stalingrad, making small circles over and over, like the constant dragonflies on perpetual missions. Their thunder can rip your head off, take your home. It tried to rainbow today. Colors bled out. The sun looked away. I crossed the field to see a cloud collapse on itself. And I've seen no deer lately. A persimmon tree, like a lightning rod, surveils my dragon flight. to lose myself on a few lawns for a short time, then fly apart. Life has a sharp blade. Don't come here for comfort, please. My noisy head, please. I will read a couple more and then I'll open it up to any questions you may have or comments or anything like that. And I very much appreciate your presence here, guys. You're very kind to listen. Here we have one called Free Will and Geology. It's one of my hobbies, geology. I am not a scientist. I just got back from Utah not too many weeks ago, and I'm fascinated by geology because it's visual history, it's physical history, it's tangible. What does that have to do with the poem? Well, we'll see. We'll see. But it starts with a little epigraph written by Galway Kinnell, one of my favorite poets. A fair price for consciousness is the quote. The great souls concluded long ago that being is a choice. A mind can break like pine from the sound of short-lived breathing, or more than just mass and motion. It can be the face looking up through dark to see the colored glass of silence and the light behind the panes. God sings a frozen note over streets, fields, rivers, and down to make the sacred tides. Damned, repellent geology of night, dread, anger, and loss. I aspire to waters while flying inside intinctions of the sunlit rain. And now thank you. And now I'll finish up with one that kind of combines so many of my inspirations, the landscape, birds, mortality, all of the things that certainly get my attention. And it's called Crow Song. A glass door opens and scares 4 or 5 like him, swarms that had been a pack. While others reform, one flies alone slowly along those night green walls. In the road round a corner, he scatters to and from a smear, waiting to bake. He has doll eyes. They blink a language, utterly means to an end. A glare formed, reforming, reactive, on watch and not, life in the wake of cars. Near the graveyard, he competes with yellow butterflies. They dance, endorse, convoy down the country's summer fade, call, respond, all near an old primitive church. Pines and green canal rights of way roll down from there to where he'll come over those rows. Sometimes he and the blues will fuss, go silent, fuss again, then conjure burning fields, divide the world into parcels of black-winged clash and long frayed oaths, while the Irish harp, or the other one, wails a river-bottom gale, a crow song, a waterspout, swollen little hurricane. No wonder he mistakes sunrise for sunset, huddles on skeleton oaks ragged with ivy. But he'll catch the first and last from up there. His feathers, like film, will peel the layers, show the daylight, all we ever have. Thank you.
Mute. Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. Everybody can unmute now. Please feel free to do that. Thank you, Ward. That was stunning.
Thank you so much.
It's just stunning. Yeah, it's amazing how poetry can both be beautiful and also speak of dark things at the same time. Beautiful. Okay. So does anyone have questions for Ward, or even just comments that you want to make? Kat, is that you?
Yeah, that's me. Well, I agree with Carol that that was really a stunning and gorgeous reading. And I felt like throughout some of it, I just wanted to cry.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked how she said, you know, you express the dark and the beauty. I mean, I wrote a couple things down. I don't know if I can ever read my writing, but change is almost always good. And yet you also said something about, you know, the world is a really difficult place near the beginning. And opposition is criminalized these days. And must be a song I dreamed. I mean, you just had endless, gorgeous, gorgeous lines. And the sound of one and one is none. The house has no center. And I love the unexpected ending of my anxious dinner. And I really agree with you around, you know, us sensitive poets and writers. We feel things deeply, and a lot of us have anxiety. And what a beautiful place to come here and have you remind us, you know, that the world is not always such a difficult place. So I really, that was an honor. Thank you very much, Wade. Ward. Sorry, Ward.
You humble me. Thank you so much for that. Very kind indeed.
Beautiful.
Anybody else?
Well, can you, I'm coming through okay? Yeah, all right. Yeah, quite a powerful reading, and you have a great voice as well. Great reading voice, and you read beautifully. It's powerful stuff. I was in Georgia many years ago, and I experienced one of those thunderstorms, and it was outrageous. It continued for hour after hour, wind and rain and lightning. And I can feel some of that in your lines here.
Yes.
And a little bit of that anxiety too, but that was so powerful, such a powerful storm. And I felt that in your words as well.
Thank you, Robert. I'm glad.
Anybody else?
Well, I can just say I'm very proud of you, Ward. You're almost like a little child of mine that's written down a nice little note. It's beautiful. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Candace.
With very good reason, Candace, absolutely. This is a fairly simple question, but it comes up for me when I hear a powerful poet speak and read his material about when do you first discover the poet in you? When did you first discover the poet in you?
I suppose it was around the time that I was 12 or 13 years old. I started also writing music at that time as well. And you know, it's strange. Why do we write? You know, the idea of creativity has as its root the idea of creation. We are trying to create a world from the world that I suppose exists around us. What makes us want to do it? I don't have a clue, but I know that it made me, well, I just had the desire to transpose these images onto paper. I didn't start out being, very good. Of course, when we're 13 years old, we are learning. But I've been writing now for about 50 years, on and off, really not quote unquote professionally until the last 20 years. So 22, 3, when I started publishing. But, it's just something that seems to happen. There's no way you can stop it. If a friend of mine once said about my writing, he said, a lot of us write, and he was a musician, a lot of us write because we really enjoy it. But Ward, you write because you have to write. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think it's accurate. It's accurate.
Thank you very much. Kieran, did you want to say something?
I hadn't intended to.
Oh, I thought I saw you kind of raise a hand.
No, it was just an appreciative
there you
gesture, I'm afraid.
go.
But
Don't feel
I
pressure.
enjoy the poems enormously, and I particularly like how accessible they are, and dealing with profound ideas and thoughts and feelings. And often too often maybe these days, people attempting to do that are more obscure than they need to be. But so the clarity, accessibility, and the feeling was delightful to hear. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, anybody else? Oh, okay. That's definitely a hand up from Doris.
Yes, hi. I really enjoyed your poems as well. And I guess the contrast of the feelings they evoked. And I could have written a lot more lines down, but I just love birds too. So birds flock like jazz. I love that line. And then life has a sharp blade. So, just the contrast of all those lines together. So very powerful poems. I really enjoyed them.
Thank you, Doris. Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm just going to read you something from someone whose microphone isn't working. It's a comment. I'm not able to use my microphone at the moment, but thank you so much for the amazing reading, Mr. Abel. I especially enjoyed hearing the inspirations behind them.
Well, good. I'm glad. I didn't know whether I should, give those inspirations away or just let them happen in the reading, but I think it may be helpful ultimately.
I think it worked beautifully. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Good. I'm glad.
Yeah. Robert?
Just a comment here, I guess, maybe a question. I have a musical background as well. And well, first of all, I'm wondering what kind of music you write, but poetry and music, I think, seem to be related. I mean, when I write, I'm feeling that rhythm. It's when I finish reading a poem, it's like boom, 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 and that kind of thing. Any comments on that?
Absolutely. And it's very insightful that you mentioned rhythm. I believe there is rhythm, particularly in free verse, that many people may not pick up on. You obviously are able to hear that, and I hope I did convey that kind of rhythm. But I tend to look at poetry and music as really indistinguishable. I have the old Anglo-Saxon approach where the old Scots were reciting in the mead halls, and the singing and the reciting were interchangeable. And you see some of that, I guess, these days in the hip hop type music. I do not write hip hop because I am probably too old to however, the music I have written over the years is probably described as things like folk and rock and, you know, every now and then jazz. I've worked with many musicians over the years, so I like it all. But the combination of spoken word and music to me is very difficult to separate, and that's why being a writer of music and being a poet and a lyricist, it's all part of the same thing as far as I can see anyway.
Gosh, okay, there
There
we
you go.
So I see Mark. Mark, were you wanting to say something? I just thought I saw you connecting to audio. No? Okay, so if everybody feels as if they've had a chance to say what they needed to say as a result of this reading, we'll probably call the end to this, unless Ward would like to finish with one last poem.
Hi, may I
Oh,
interrupt?
Mark. Okay, there you are.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm calling in from Connecticut, and unfortunately, I missed almost the whole thing because of today's my wedding anniversary.
Well,
Well, thank you. So I just wanted to say that Ward and I go back over 40 years, and I remember sitting in London with him, listening to him play guitar and, you know, essentially read poetry to what he was playing. So I hope you guys had a great time listening to his latest work, but he's an amazing, talented artist, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to listen to the whole thing.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that very much. Yes, we went to school together in London back in 1980. Golly, I just dated myself again. So, Mark, you're very kind. Thank you, brother.
Good to see you, Ward. You look great, and I would turn my camera on, but you know my gray hair would probably do something to the Zoom call here, so I don't want to do that. But you guys have a great afternoon, and it's good to see you again, Ward.
Thank you, Mark, very much. Okay, I will read a last one then. And this one is called Down to the Shell of What Was a Store. I often go walking to get my exercise these days, and there's a small town named Charleston, Georgia nearby, where there are some remains of former businesses in a little mill town that went the way of many of the mill towns. And so it got me thinking. Down to the shell of what was a store's four corners, concrete block vines climb the wet walls, and no roof blocks out the sky from all that comes with it. It's years later since heart first went to the knuckle with time. Today, even ghosts have abandoned such places. The world's not the same world. The song's not the same song. So much has gone from here only to be replaced with whirs, flashes, clangs. Out back of an old metal sign, on an old metal sign, an unrecognizable face rusted and nailed to a post strains to send a message out to anyone who will listen. His cries oxidize when hitting the air like the way of the holy, whose example can only be, at most, pencil shading a blank sheet to find shadow words. But there is salvation in damaged goods, and no growth in perfection. At solstice and equinox, the rising sun comes straight through where a door used to latch.
what a beautiful choice for your final poem. Perfect. Absolutely
you.
perfect.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. And thank you, Candace, for making this possible.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Great afternoon. Thank you.
It has been.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of you. You have made this a wonderful experience, and thank you for the opportunity, Carol and Candace.
Welcome.
Honestly, my pleasure. I'm sure Candace is the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ward. It's been a beautiful afternoon.
Thank you, Rebecca, and your sisters.
Thank you, Ward.
Thank you, Ward and Carol and Candace.